Halloween is just around the corner and we're all in the mood for a spooky little story. But maybe you don't have enough time to dive into, for example, The Exorcist or Dracula or The Shining, and you're just looking for a little taste of fear. In this video, I'm gonna give you 10 short horror stories, and best of all, at the time of this recording, they're all free. I don't know why that required an evil laugh. That's not evil, is it, that they're free? No, yeah, they're free. They're written by some of the best names in horror. I'm gonna tell you what they're all about, and then after I've told you about each one of them, you can choose which ones you'd like, and then you'll find the link to each of them in the description below. So let's get started with the first one, and that is Zombie by Joyce Carol Oates. I told you there were some good names in this. This is a first-person narrative that delves into the mind of Quentin P. He's the protagonist in this. And he is a very troubled man who is navigating therapy sessions and probation. He serves as a caretaker in this old Victorian house near a university campus, and Quentin kind of harbors this dark obsession that he pursues in secret. And just a heads up, before you dive into this one, this story is loosely based on the life of Jeffrey Dahmer, so, you know, buckle up for that. The next story that's available for free online, a little short horror story, is The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. And this one, I think, might feel very close to home for some people. It kind of did for me a little bit, because it's about a young family that have this automated home called the Happy Life Home. And what at first seems like this convenience, it starts to feel a little bit controlling and oppressive as they all become more and more dependent on the features of the home. It kind of goes from convenience to necessity to just complete domination pretty quickly. The next book that's available for free online is Bloodchild by Octavia E. Butler. This is a science fiction story about a future in which humans known as Terrans live on a distant planet under the control of an insect-like alien species called the Click. The story is mostly about the kind of complex relationship between the two species, where the Click, I am pronouncing it right. It's T-L-I-C, Click. And they use humans as hosts for their offspring. The narrative kind of centers around a young human boy named Gan, who's chosen to carry the eggs of a Click. And as always, Butler's writing is just heavy with themes like power dynamics and exploitation. So you can expect a lot of thematic work going on there as well. Next up is The Daemon Lover by Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson is probably a name that's familiar to a lot of people. She also wrote The Haunting of Hill House and We Have Always Lived in a Castle. And this short story is a psychological tale about a woman preparing for her wedding day, only to find that her fiancé has mysteriously disappeared. As she embarks on a kind of like a frantic search through the city, she's visiting various places that he might be. Everywhere she goes, nobody seems to know what she's talking about. They don't even seem to have any kind of knowledge of this groom. And she's thinking the whole time, are these people just absolutely gaslighting me, or is something else going on? It's very tense, and it's filled with that kind of like underlying sense of anxiety, you know? Another creepy one is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. This story has, in my opinion, certainly the most terrifying villains in fiction, but also one of the most sort of darkly oppressive forces that I've ever read about. This is a dystopian science fiction story, right? And it's set in this post-apocalyptic world where this super intelligent artificial intelligence called Am, that's the villain in the story, has just wiped out humanity, and there's only 5 individuals left. And these individuals, Am just keeps around just to torture for all of eternity. The story is told from the perspective of Ted. He's one of the 5 survivors, as the group have to endure this kind of bizarre psychological and physical torment in this nightmarish world that Am controls. This book is all about despair. It's about that feeling of powerlessness and the cruelty of just unchecked power and unchecked technology and where it could lead us. It's quite ambiguous in a lot of elements of the story. I do wish sometimes that it went into a little bit more detail, but yeah, this book isn't really about that. This book is all about how if you have a force that doesn't have to answer to anything and can do whatever it wants, what does that look like? And it's terrifying. Like I said, I am going to put links to all of the stories in the description below. But for this one, I'm also going to put a YouTube video link as well, because Harlan Ellison read this book, like narrated this book, and he really goes for it. You know, like his vision of what this character is like, he doesn't hold back in his narration. So I'll definitely put that in there as well. The next book that's available for free, a little short horror story, is Button Button by Richard Matheson. He also wrote I Am Legend, if you're familiar with that story. And this is about a kind of question. What if every time you pushed a button, you received $50,000? However, someone you didn't know died. Would you still push the button? And how many times would you push the button? This might sound a little bit familiar to you because this short story's been adapted in a Twilight Zone episode a while back, and also more recently in a movie with Cameron Diaz called The Box. I liked it. The next short story is The Sloan Men by David Nichol. So I want you to picture this. You're going to meet your boyfriend's family for the first time. You're nervous. You want things to go well. But from the second you step into their house, something just feels off. This is what happens to the protagonist, Judith, when she goes to meet her boyfriend, Herman's parents. Things go from kind of awkward to just completely creepy. I don't want to give away too much about this story, so what I'll do is just read the opening line to you, and so you're going to get an idea of the tone of this book. Mrs. Sloan had only 3 fingers on her left hand, but when she drummed them against the countertop, the tiny polished bones at the end of the 4th and 5th stumps clattered like fingernails. That's the vibe. Next up is The Viaduct Killer by Peter Straub. You might know Peter Straub as the writer of Ghost Story. Also, he co-wrote The Talisman with Stephen King. In this story, The Viaduct Killer has the whole city on edge. 6 women have been found beneath this towering bridge supports, and they've all got their throats cut. The thing that makes this creepy, I think, is that the killer is always portrayed as someone from the city that is just blending into everyday life. It's a little bit of a modern day Jack the Ripper situation going on. They could be a parent. They could be a construction worker that you pass every day on the way to work. They could be your kid's school teacher, someone on the bus. This isn't really just about the murders. It's about a kind of city that's in denial and quietly ignoring this darkness that's lurking beneath the surface. It's about a city that is growing numb to evil. Next up is Patient Zero by Tananarive Due, and this story follows Jay, who's this young boy isolated in a hospital due to a dangerous virus that he carries. And this makes him just a permanent threat to everyone that's around him. He's surrounded by these, I would say, quite protective caregivers in hazmat suits. But other than that, he's just completely cut off from the outside world. And this story is told through the young boy's journal entries as he kind of clings to memories as things just start to get worse and worse in the hospital that he lives in. And he starts to consider an escape attempt, sort of no matter what the consequences might be. Next up is a book that I've spoken about previously, actually, and that is Penpal by Dathan Auerbach. You can find this one as a 2-part special episode on the No Sleep podcast, if you're familiar with that podcast. And this story follows an unnamed narrator as he kind of pieces together strange events from his childhood through a series of memories. And as he reflects, he uncovers unsettling truths that his mother has kind of hidden from him for years. So in this podcast episode, it's backed by this very atmospheric ambient music. I think some people will love that, but some people, they might not like the music playing throughout the whole episode. If that's not for you, then I would suggest getting the book, Penpal by Dathan Auerbach. This is, I think, the only place you're going to be able to find an audio version of the book. There's no audio book available on Audible, for example. I looked it up, or on Libby. I couldn't find anything on there. So, but yeah, those are the 10 free short stories to creep yourself out with. All of the links to all of those stories are in the description box below. If you'd like to know the 10 scariest books that I've ever read, then you can click up here to see that video. Should be coming out in a couple of days. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and happy reading. I hope you get really freaked out and shit your pants.